Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Wokingham Borough Council Planning Committee meeting of the 16th of September. Sorry for the couple of minutes delay in the start, issue with the sound system. Please ensure your mobile phones are switched off or to silent, and I can confirm that there's no fire drill planned. As you would have noted, the proceedings are filmed and will be available on the WBC website for everybody to see. The registered speakers who've already registered to speak will be invited to come and speak at the relevant time. You have a 3-minute session, and as I always say, members are interested in the quality of what we're saying rather than the quantity. If I could just go through a few procedural matters. The planning committee is made up of 9 elected members, borough councillors, and we're supported by a variety of professional council officers. On my far right is Mary Severin, who is the borough's solicitor, who's here to give us legal advice should we require it. Next to her is Colm O'Carbonig, who's our Democratic Services Officer, who is clerk to this committee. And on my immediate right is Councillor Tim Holton, who is the Vice Chairman. I'm Simon Weeks, I chair the committee. On my left is Claire Lawrence, who is the Head of Development Management. And next to her is Chris Easton, who is the Service Manager for Highways. And the other members of the Planning Committee are sitting on the left and right wings of these tables. The committee is quasi-judicial with formal and set procedures and conduct. Firstly, the planning officer will present each application. Then I will call in turn only those who pre-registered to speak. If you come forward to the table that's in front here, the microphone is controlled by the button on the unit. After your 3 minutes is up, you will hear quite a loud bleeping noise, which is an indication that if you haven't already finished, we'd ask you to summarise very briefly. And as I say, members are interested in the quality of what you have to say. No other people, residents, applicants, town or parish councils, agents, objectors or supporters are allowed to speak. Please don't interrupt the meeting, and the questions will be asked by the planning committee members after the presentation. Finally, a reminder that as the local planning authority, it's our role to determine valid planning applications against national and local planning policy. It is not our role to suggest alterations to planning applications or to schemes. It's not our role to comment on whether they are a good idea, whether they make economic sense, whether they are too costly, or whether there are alternative uses. Our role is to apply the planning element of the current regulations. So if we move straight on tonight's agenda, apologies, Tom?
Yes, Chris Singleton and Malcolm Richards. Apologies.
Right, so we have two members of the planning committee absent. Declarations of interest, any members? Wayne?
Chair, item 43 mentions Southern Gas Networks, which is part of Scottish and Southern Energy, and I work for one of the others, British Gas.
Okay. Thank you. No other members declaring interest. Claire, are there any matters to be withdrawn?
No, Chairman.
Right, so we have a full agenda, and for those who are not aware, we have a group of people waiting in the council chamber for the second item on the agenda. As you've seen from the agenda, it's quite a full agenda this evening. Right, I've just got to sign the minutes unless anybody has any issues on those that they believe are inaccurate or need correction. Any members wishing to raise any matters? In that case, I shall sign the minutes of the last meeting as an accurate record. Okay, so without further ado, we'll move straight on to the first application, which is F2014-1561, which is land at Old Wokingham Road, Crowthorne. And for those of you that came to the last planning committee and unfortunately were turned away, that was because a discrepancy was noticed on the planning application, and it was felt it was unsound to bring it forward. So further work has been done and corrections, which we'll hear about later tonight. So this will be presented tonight by Ashley Smith. Ashley.
Thank you, Chairman. The application for the Planning Committee is for the erection of 116 dwellings, associated access, parking and landscaping, as well as a SANG and other ancillary features. The The site was allocated for residential development under MDD policy SAL 01. The site is located within the settlement limits of Crowthorne. The settlement limits were obviously expanded to incorporate this site as part of the MDD process, although the site has been allocated as a reserve site under the old local plan. This slide here shows the application site. The northern part of the site is for the SANG and the southern part of the site is for the residential dwellings. The application is a cross-boundary application, so there is an identical application submitted to Bracknell Parish Council, which is under consideration as a strip of land adjacent to Old Wokingham Road is within Bracknell Forest Council. The application is being considered by Bracknell tomorrow evening and is also recommended for approval. Access to the site is off Old Wokingham Road. There's a single point of access for vehicles. The access complies with all visibility requirements and is considered acceptable by the Highway Authority. This single point of access leads through to, there's also an emergency access in the southern part of the site for emergency vehicle use only. The access leads through to 116 dwellings, which are a good mix of 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 beds and 4 beds, spread in a loose formation across the site. There is a central open play space in the middle, as well as very good access to the adjacent SAG, which was allocated under policy SAL 05. Adjacent to Old Wokingham Road is a vegetative buffer of 40 metres. This was a requirement of the allocation in the MDD and serves to screen the development from the motorway and from the Old Wokingham Road and to give a vegetative buffer. The unit types are of traditional scale and form, using an array of materials, mainly traditional brickwork and tiles. The existing site, as members saw when they visited the site about a month ago, is heavily vegetated and has been since allocation. This is to the north of the site, so this is approximately here. But most of the site itself is vegetated, as members saw on site. This slide here shows the vegetative buffer and where the access will be and onto Old Wokingham Road. This is where the emergency access is here. This is very overgrown, but will obviously be cut back to incorporate that access. The 116 dwellings incorporate 255 car parking spaces, as well as an additional 71 garages. That works out to be 2.2 car parking spaces per dwelling, or 2.8 car parking spaces if garages were to be included. Another thing which is unusual at this site is that the SANG is to be provided through a private arrangement. This arrangement has been agreed with Natural England, and so effectively the maintenance of the SANG will be covered by a private management company. All the housing development is within settlement limits, however, and the SANG is within the designated countryside. All properties meet the requisite separation distances and are considered to be of good design by officers. They all meet the internal space standard and the amenity space standards as well. As members will note from the updates, affordable housing is now to be provided in the form of a commuted sum of approximately £4.2 million. This approach has been agreed by the relevant executive members for affordable housing. Other matters to update members on are changes to condition 25, which is slightly reworded, but the thrust of the condition remains the same. And I believe that is it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ashley. Now we have 3 people registered to speak. Firstly, could I call Janet Rogers from Parish Council? You press the grey button on the microphone.
I have some slides, I don't know how to make those come up.
Top one, is it?
by a finger.
If you want to, or
Or if you just indicate.
Okay, you
when
need to
it's-
get to the congratulations. Sure you will agree. Mr Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Working Without Parish Council. The slide shows the context. We're talking the Bracknell, Crowthorne, Wokingham Triangle with 7,000 homes planned over the next 10 years. That's roughly 30% of the combined Bracknell and Wokingham total. More pertinently, we see two adjacent major development sites down what Ashley referred to as the Old Wokingham Road motorway. And the woodland site under discussion tonight, the 116 houses, and TRL, the 1,000 sites. If both of these sites were in WBC, then they would be treated as a strategic development location, with all the status, oversight and governance to ensure a holistic approach. Despite the valiant efforts of many, including Councillor Ross and Councillor Kaiser, we still do not have an effective cross-border forum, let alone appropriate oversight or governance. Until this is in place, development with this triangle risks failure at huge expense to the borough and its residents. The devil's obviously in the detail, and the devil hasn't turned up yet at the TRL. So to assess this development without the detail is really difficult. Where the detail is available, specifically relating to highways and very specifically secondary education, there's a disconcerting lack of agreement between the two boroughs, not even referred to in the planning officer's report. It does once again reinforce the need for cross-boundary working. Specific objections to the site, the loss of an important, well-used amenity space with detrimental impact to landscape character enforced by Bracknell Forest and visual amenity of the area. The ecological risk caused by the reduction in the 9 Mile Ride Green Corridor carries significant further harm. Identical arguments, I would remind councillors, that were successfully advanced by WBC and subsequently upheld by the Planning Inspectorate in refusing the Pine Ridge mobile home site, a very similar site just a few yards away from the site here. Whilst our woodlands are well loved by many today, this is a decision about our future, not our today. And whilst our planning process is very comprehensive, it does have the disadvantage of excluding those most affected by the development. That's our children and young people, those who will actually live in the community. If you'd like to press the next slide. And here's what they said, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. Why don't they build houses on the TRL? Without the woods, it will look really funny. Who's going to build new houses for the hedgehogs to live in? And where are all the cars going to fit? Mr Chairman, our youngest, our children, our future, have eloquently summarised the case against this development, and I respectfully propose that you refuse this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Gemma Kerr, who's agent for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. The application before you this evening is for the development of an allocated site within the MDD for 116 dwellings with associated access, parking, landscaping, SANG and ancillary features. The site is owned by Wokingham United Charities, which is an amalgamation of 21 local Wokingham charities. The objective of Wokingham United Charities is the relief of poverty, hardship or distress. The proceeds of sale would be invested with the interest awarded as grants. In the main, grants are delivered via various support agencies, including social services, primary care trusts, home-to-school liaison officers, school managers and organisations supporting the armed services. This application is the result of a lengthy negotiation and discussion between the applicant, the community and the council, and the resultant scheme is one which coherently addresses the concerns of a wide range of consultees. This allocated site is capable of coming forward in the short term, and if permitted, it will make an important contribution to maintaining the borough's housing land supply on a suitable and entirely sustainable site. The principle of the development on this site is long established and supported by both national and local policy. The applicant has engaged in detailed discussion with housing officers and at the council's request has agreed to pay a commuted sum towards the delivery of affordable housing in lieu of delivery on site. This approach is also in line with comments that we have received from the local community. The applicant is proposing to deliver on-site SANG in accordance with policy, in addition to making silk contributions as necessary. The SANG will be privately managed as agreed with Natural England. As mentioned, the site is well vegetated. The applicant has taken care to ensure that the development reflects the existing character of the site and has maintained a substantial 40-metre buffer between the development and Old Wokingham Road to minimise the change to the appearance of the area. This is a significant benefit to the scheme, and it provides a far greater level of landscaping to mitigate the loss of vegetation than may otherwise ordinarily be expected. This is also in line with feedback that we've received from local residents. The layout has been carefully considered to ensure appropriate back-to-back distances are maintained to minimise any impact on surrounding properties. We have worked with residents and the local authority to design a sustainable urban drainage system that will not only address the impact of our proposal, but will represent an enhancement to a currently unmanaged drainage system. The development is considered to be an acceptable design and layout on a sustainable site, bringing with it tangible benefits for the locality, including the provision of an on-site SANG. It makes a significant contribution towards the delivery of affordable housing in the borough, includes a generous 40-metre landscape buffer to lessen the impact of the vehicle access, and to minimise, insofar as possible, the changing character that will arise as a result of the development coming forward. The application is the result of lengthy negotiation, and the applicant has worked very hard to ensure that the comments of all parties have been taken into account in the final scheme before you this evening. No technical objections have been raised. We respectfully request that permission is granted.
Thank you very much. And could I now call Councillor Angus Ross, local board member.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Committee. This has been a long process. The site being put in the local plan over 10 years ago against the wishes of the residents, local councillors and planning officers. Then this application has been going through a tortuous process here since it was first put back in July 2014. It's had many amendments. I can at least say that the issues which have arisen during that process have all been considered. And whilst I understand the sensitivities of those living in close proximity, I believe we've now reached something of a reasonable compromise. I have been perplexed by the approach of Bracknell Forest Council while recognising the need for their approval as the access comes off their borough highways land, as we've seen. I trust any other concerns will be dealt with solely under their consultation responses which we've received. But maybe some will be raised when they meet to determine the application tomorrow. But importantly, for the avoidance of doubt, the site remains within Edgebarrow School catchment. Other issues on that are education and not planning ones. I still hope better planning for access, safety on Old Wokingham Road, cycle routes, etc. can still be arranged with Bracknell. My concerns, and we've mirrored this from the Parish Council, are primarily around the phasing of the build-out of this application, together with developments across the road at TRL, Broadmoor, Main Corner and our South Wokingham SDL. Close working between the borough councils is essential, as each application cannot be looked at in total isolation for its impact, especially accesses off the Old Wokingham Road into existing roads, the TRL and this site. Maybe committee would consider adding an informative on those lines. One issue which has caused much concern is drainage. Until the TRL site developer puts in his holding ponds, there is still danger of flooding into our site from TRL. I accept that the drainage within our application site has been accepted by this council and the Environment Agency experts as adequate, but concern remains until TRL is developed. The SANG area has been kept within the site, and that is welcomed, as it can replace the casual use of the woods which has been used by residents over many years. It also provides better off-road access to Pinewood Leisure Centre, our local gem. It's unfortunate this SANG area will not be transferred to our management. The off-site provision of affordable housing is also welcomed by residents and councillors, though where this will be provided locally is unclear. Finally, we never wanted the site developed for all manner of environmental issues, but the rug was pulled by the local planning inspector 10 years ago, so regrettably we have to accept the principle of development. please consider the points that I and the Parish Council have made on behalf of the ward and our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. So that concludes those registered to speak. So before we turn this over to the committee to consider, just to summarise a couple of points, I think it's important that members of the planning committee visited the site 5 weeks ago, which was a week before it was originally scheduled on the planning committee. So we have seen the site, and we looked at the site between 8 and 8:30 on a weekday morning to get an idea of the traffic implications as well. The other couple of points I think just mentioned is that as has already been mentioned by a number of speakers, that this is a site that is allocated for housing. Once a site is allocated for housing, and that has been assessed and approved by an independent planning inspector who has nothing to do with Wokingham, that is a site that's going to be developed. It's no point in us pretending it won't be developed. What we can only do is try and ensure that what is developed on that site is of good quality, is compliant with planning policy, and attempts where possible to address probably not all, but the majority of residents' reservations. So I'll now hand over to members who may wish to speak on this. Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Two questions, really. I understand now that the MDD was approved by the inspector, or the site was approved by the inspector, so we are basically up a creek without a paddle on that one. But on the MDD, I understand that with 100 houses allocated, and the applicant's proposing 116. Is that acceptable would be my question. And also, looking at the elevations of the buildings you showed, they look quite tall because everything seems to have this pointy roof these days. Have you got any idea of building heights, please?
Yeah, let's take the second question first.
Sorry, the second question first. They're not particularly tall. They're about the same height as most other ones. I think they're in the region of 7.5 to 8 metres in height for two-storey dwellings. It's pretty ordinary, really. And regards the MDD allocation question, the site was allocated for around 100 houses. As we've seen, I mean, nearly all the allocated sites have been through this committee so far. Some come in under, some are coming in over. The most important thing really is the fit, and whether or not a layout which can comply with borough standards and be appropriate, it can be reached. And the density of this scheme is about 27.5 dwellings per hectare, which is very much in line, in fact lower than some of the schemes that we've seen come through under MDD allocation.
I'd also point out, Bob, that we actually, ourselves as a committee, tried and tested this on a site that we're considering later tonight, which is the Manor site in Chinfield, which is also allocated for 100. We went and looked at the site. The university, I think was the developer at the time, wanted to put 126. And we felt that was a step too far. We refused it, and it went to appeal, and was won at appeal, so taken out of our hands. The other caution, of course, as I always do make, is that if decisions are taken out of the hands of this committee and go to appeal, we have no influence over the outcome of that, and we are not able to try and minimise impact by applying the necessary conditions that we believe that are there to protect residents' interests, both existing residents and future residents. The planning inspector does it. He sits down at head office in Bristol and applies the standard off-the-shelf set of conditions, which often doesn't reflect the concerns of local residents, which we attempt to do. Rochelle.
Yes, you said there were only going to be two-story buildings. However, page 52 and page 49, you have two-story buildings, the flats, and I'm curious how that is actually in keeping.
Sorry, I didn't see it.
Sorry, and I've got a few more questions as well. How much higher is that building? Why are we putting affordable housing someplace else? That's my big question. Are these people too good to have people who can't afford to buy houses in the same things as they are? Or is there any particular reason for this?
That's a matter for the council officers and the developer. The actual The requirement is that the developer contributes towards affordable housing. Strategically, sometimes the council wants that on site, other times they might want the money for affordable housing for other projects elsewhere in the area.
And lastly, I want to ask about flooding. Now, if there is more flooding caused by the TRL, will this particular location alleviate that?
Okay, so we've got the issue about three-storey and flooding, please.
Okay. I'll start with just following up on the, I'll start with the affordable housing question just quickly first. The developer was perfectly happy to provide on-site affordable housing and has put the offer forward of either on-site or a financial contribution, and it's the council has decided that the financial contribution would be appropriate in this case to the executive members for affordable housing. Regards to the heights of the building, I didn't say there was only two-storey houses on the site. There are 2, 2.5 and 3-storey houses as per the officer report. All are of normal and traditional scale, which are the same as many of the other sites in the area. Similarly, all the separation distances meet the requirements of the Borough Design Guide, either for 2 or 3-storey houses. So those issues are covered. With regards to the flooding, both the council and the EA are aware of what's going on at TRL and have taken into account this. Basically, the development in itself needs to mitigate the harm caused by the presence of new built form on the site. The applicant has demonstrated to the satisfaction of WBC Drainage and EA that this development will lead to mitigation or betterment than the harm caused by the presence of the new buildings, and therefore, in planning terms, it meets the requirements of the NPPF and our policies.
Just Chair, just simple questions. Do all the gardens meet the standards and all the rooms in the houses?
Yeah, actually confirmed that in his presentation.
I missed that, sorry.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm awfully sorry, we can't hear the questions over here.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me know. I'll ask speakers to speak more clearly. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you beautifully.
Okay.
I wouldn't like developers to get the idea that there's sort of 10 or 15% margin on the number of houses they could build above the MDD. I think perhaps right to raise the point that 116 is greater than 100, but what we need to do is to show that the density is too great or there's overcrowding. I don't know whether that's what Bob wished to imply, but I think if it is, even if we were 100, even if it were 90, if it's overcrowded, then that would be a reason for refusal, but I don't think that is the case here.
Well, I think we heard that it had a density of approximately 27.5 houses. Most of the strategic development locations are at 35 houses per hectare, so it's well below that, which may partly reflect the nature of the site. Any other members wishing to speak? Well,
just a couple for you, Ashley. Further to the site visit, the buffer at the front that borders the old Wokingham Road, is that 40 metres? Did you say it was about 40 metres?
That's correct.
And has there been any further development on the landscaping plan for the rear gardens of Hatch Ride?
That's right. The buffer is 40 metres along the old Wokingham Road side. One of the issues which was required a lot of attention really and was a sensitive issue for residents was separation distance along Hatch Ride there. There is a landscaping plan that's been provided by the developer, and the buffer along the access road here has been significantly increased to allow more room for vegetation. So final details of that buffer will be secured by the landscaping condition. However, we have an indicative plan which shows adequate enough cover.
Yeah, just to for clarity, to reiterate what you said and to ask Claire whether this is an unbalanced decision or a strong recommendation. Because, as you so rightly pointed out, if we refuse this without a good reason that the inspector agrees with, because I'm sure the applicant will go to appeal, everything's taken away from us. We have no control over the development at all. So I'd just like Claire's input on that, please.
Through you, Chairman, yes, officers are satisfied that the scheme is acceptable and that all the normal requirements are met as set out in the road design guide. So there is a very clear recommendation of approval.
Okay. I've got a few questions actually. The emergency access, how is it, could you just clarify for us how that is controlled to make sure it's not misused? This is, I think, one of the first sites I've seen where the SANG is provided through a private arrangement. What level of security do we have that the company that is there to manage it will be around long term and it won't end up with the council having to look after it? Could you just answer those two, please?
The emergency access will be bollarded. Effectively, the emergency service, it will have a key, so it will probably be some kind of metal folding bollard, and the emergency services have a generic key which allows the bollards to be folded down when needs be. With regards to the SANG, SANG is, there's only one other private SANG in the borough, which is on the Reading University, one of the Reading University sites. The arrangement is through the legal agreements, the developer deposits a certain amount of money which acts as a kind of surety for the normal.
It's a bond, really.
It's effectively a bond. As well as that, they need to agree to step-in rights so that if things did go very wrong and the company went under, then the council would step in and that bond would be there for the future maintenance of the site.
Okay. The other point is just that the speaker from the Parish Council mentioned that we seem to be applying different rules. I think that's how I understood it when compared with the Pine Ridge site further along. Of course, the huge distinction is the Pine Ridge site is totally contrary to policy, does not have the benefit of planning permission, which is why the council has taken a strong line on that, has dragged it all through the courts for several years, whereas this is an allocated site, so that's the principal difference on that. I think any other members wishing to speak? Chris, would you come back?
Just a small point. I think on the site visit we were told the emergency access, which is on Hatch Rise, it's got a cycle access. Is that correct? Yeah, good.
And by default, pedestrian access as well. Right. Okay, John?
Yeah, just one question, Chairman. There's been a discussion around what Bracknell's doing. No, we're not here to judge that. But where are Bracknell with that? Do we know? I mean, has it been approved and has it been approved in?
Tomorrow it's due to come to Bracknell Forest Borough Council.
And this is the 1 metre strip?
That's correct. Of this site, 1 metre of it
is falls
within
Bracknell. And with regards to the TRL site, could we have an informative on that could possibly say that takes into consideration the drainage?
Okay. How do we stand with informatives on other authorities? Because we don't have any authority over another authority.
That's correct. Firstly, to answer Councillor's first question, the application is before Bracknell's committee tomorrow night, and the recommendation is also for approval. I don't really see any benefit in adding an informative, because once planning permissions, if planning permission was to be awarded by this committee, obviously it's a material consideration in any case, as the allocation of this site was in the first place, so it's something Bracknell would naturally consider anyway.
Right, and finally I just ask, does any member of the planning committee want to propose an alternative to the officer recommendation for approval of this application? I see no one indicating. In that case, we'll take this to the vote. Members who visited the site, this application has been considered and I guess refined over the last 60 weeks. It's been with the council for over a year. We have what the officers, professional planning officers, are recommending clear approval on this. It is policy compliant. It is an allocated site. So members, could you please indicate that you're willing to support the officer's recommendation tonight? And that is unanimously carried, so that application is approved. Could I ask those people that are here for this application to leave, because we have about 70 or 80 people for another application, which is our next item on our agenda. Thank you very much. Good evening. Sorry it's a bit of a squash, but we dispatched the first agenda item as quickly as we could, because we became aware that the big group of people coming for this one. First question is, did you hear my introduction to how the planning committee works in the other room, or would you like me to spend a minute reiterating that? You didn't hear it? Oh, you did hear it or didn't?
It was quiet.
It was quiet, okay, I'll just try and summarise the key bits. The planning committee is quasi-judicial. We have set process and procedures which we'd ask you to comply with. People are registered in advance to speak. This is not a public meeting. It's a public meeting in terms of you being able to see what goes on. It's not a public meeting in terms of having everybody having their choice to have a say. That is what the consultation period has been about that's gone on before this. The planning committee is made up... Sorry? Okay, the planning committee is made up of elected borough councillors who represent both the political parties at Wokingham, and we are here to apply the planning laws as they stand nationally and locally. The job of the planning committee is not to redesign applications, decide whether they are a good idea, decide whether they make sense, decide whether they're needed. Our job is simply to apply the planning laws. When we apply those planning laws, we have to use our best judgment as lay people, and many members of the planning committee have served on the committee for a number of years, so have got quite a lot of experience. You're probably aware that less than 5% of planning applications that are decided at Wokingham come to this planning committee. We have to do all the difficult ones. And our role, as I said, is to apply fairly national planning rules. If we decide to approve a planning application, there is no right of appeal. If we decide to refuse a planning application, the applicant has a right of appeal. It is the only aspect of the British legal system where only one side has additional rights. I'm not going to suggest that's right. I've always, I've always thought it's wrong, but it's the national rule that we have to operate under. Okay, so for tonight, we have the application. I would just stress that the members of the planning committee visited the site last Friday morning. We arrived at the site at just before 8:30, and so obviously we were aware of the school, and those of us who drive through there were aware of it already. And we went down Jaldings Lane, and we went down the lower entrance in Jaldings Lane, and we walked through the site, and we came back out of the top entrance near the old pub. So we're familiar with the site. So I think hopefully that summarises it for you, and we just to let you know we have the following people registered to speak: Jonathan Wheelwright from the Parish Council, Andrew Hooper representing local residents, and Robin Bradbeer and Ben Donaldson, agents for the applicant. So without further ado, we'll go straight on to the application, and it's being presented tonight by Graham Hall. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is for a biogas anaerobic digestion power generation facility with 3 digester tanks, the creation of a storage lagoon, and associated plant and equipment. The site is within Farley Hill, which is in designated countryside. The area is rural and predominantly residential, but there is a school and nursing home nearby. The existing access will be utilised from Jaldings Lane, which will give direct access to the digester tanks. The lagoon will be located further south and downhill with the tanks. This is a technical drawing of the tanks and lagoon, as well as some of the silage clamps that will be between them. Members will recall from the site visit the location of the lagoon to the left of the picture, set against the backdrop. It's looking further left with the byway at the end of the field. And this is the view from Jaldings Lane, where the tanks will be visible but are lower than the height of the trees. This is the access from Jaldings Lane leading towards the farm. And facing the other way, the access itself onto Jaldings Lane, which members will recall from the site visit. In principle, the application is considered acceptable given that it would be an increase in the use of renewable energy, which is in accordance with national and local planning policy. It is an advantageous site for the AD plant due to connection to the gas pipeline being in close proximity, as well as other reasons as listed in the report. It also represents farm diversification, which is also in accordance with national and local policy. The tanks would also be located on a non-agricultural section of the farm. In terms of character, it is acknowledged that there will be some negative impact due to the scale of the proposal. However, the existing vegetation would be enhanced with additional landscaping to help mitigate this. Although the paint colour is to be agreed at a condition stage, this would help to mitigate the impact on the landscape. Measures are in place to contain odours, but it should be noted that the AD plant would have less of an impact compared to the lawful use of keeping cattle. Additionally, safety measures are in place to prevent the failure of the AD plant.
Just going through a couple of the highways aspects. Obviously, as you're aware, the site is located off of Jordan's Lane. The existing access track on the farm will be used, and conditions are applied to the application to secure the gates are open during the operation and the hours of operation of the site, and also for the provision of a bonded surface to ensure the migration of any material from the site is brought out to Jordan's Lane. Traffic generation has been assessed and determined using to identify the net change, which has taken into account the residual use on site and the existing use on site, which obviously will be falling away. There's no personal injury accidents that have been recorded in the last 3 years. There's one that was recorded just over 3 years, which is in May in 2012, and that wasn't involving any HGVs or any larger vehicles. It was a single vehicle that conflicted with an object that was running across the carriageway, and they left the carriageway on their own means. Traffic management has also been consulted in respect of any issues that have been highlighted by residents or the parish, and from obviously looking at the data that they've obtained, there have been no regular complaints or issues related to any of the aspects that have been identified through the objections. The site, obviously, as you're all aware as well, is located close to the A327, approximately 650 metres, and the majority of the trips identified are identified to go that direction, out towards the east, although some of the local farms and fields are located to the west, and as such there will be movements identified with this AD plant going that direction. However, a condition is also applied to the use of this site, restricting the hours of use where the school is in operation at the peak times, so drop off the peak. And therefore there's also a restriction condition applied for the AD plant, which obviously ensures that it is as it is in terms of wheat, rye, grass, etc., rather than obviously a waste product such as cow waste, etc. And we've also had a look at the intensification of the development, what it could obviously fall back to under its existing agricultural uses and under agricultural diversification. One of them is obviously returning back to a livestock business that once ran on site prior to the foot-and-mouth epidemic in 2001. In terms of data review, many of you will probably be aware that there is a lot of data out there. Many of you have provided it to the council as part of your objections. The council has taken a review of the data provided in the transport assessment, and the main findings are based upon that. However, moving forward, what we've done is we've looked at the data provided by the AD group, the Farley Hill AD group, as well as some other residents. And we've identified, based on that, we're not saying that these are the figures that are moving forward, but just taking those into account to give you some understanding. What we've done is we've taken those figures, which are higher than projected in the transport assessment, transport statement. We've taken into account and deducted off the existing business, which obviously is falling away, but retained the residual. We've then times that by 2, which is something that the technical note produced by the AD group had done to ensure that the two-way trips or round trips have been considered. And then we've applied that systematically across the year and for each of the months in line with the frequencies that were identified in the TS. So on those figures, we've got a worst case of 455, this is the worst case, 455 movements resulting from this farm, from Hill Farm, in June. Some months obviously fluctuate and are significantly lower. For example, there's 74 in January, 22 in February. But we take June as the worst case of 455 movements that have been identified. That there, divided over the month of June, 30 days, equates to between 15 and 16 vehicles. Now, we've got hours of operation. The farm, as you expect, hours of daylight savings, etc. They kind of operate at different times. June is obviously a longer light period. However, if we take that as an 8-hour day, not the 12-hour, 8 to 8 that sometimes is operated, that would generate only 2 vehicle movements per hour. with the 16 vehicles identified across that day. So in terms
You're going to answer that?
Sorry, you're not having any interruptions, please, otherwise we'll stop.
I've got those figures, yeah. There is a various amount of current use on site, which I could run through. There's quite a lot of data here. But however, I think it's worth pointing out that whilst obviously that is identified, and it would be very difficult to, there are restrictions in place for the AD plant itself. The difficulty is in terms of monitoring, there are other farms in the area. As such, with agricultural vehicles, we're stopping every single one to determine what's actually in the trailer. And it's very difficult to kind of enforce such a condition. However, when you look at the existing
sorry, can we just conduct this in a business-like fashion, please? I will just state that Chris is trying to give you the factual information. You may not agree with it, but interruptions are not going to help matters. So please could I ask you to cooperate? Thank you.
We've had a look obviously at the existing use of the site, but we've also taken into account looking back at the 2001 when the farm obviously used to have a livestock business, and at the time had 700 cattle, 13,000 sheep, and also produced hay, small bales and large bales. And in terms of that actually generated the use of 18-tonne and 30-tonne vehicles, as well as obviously other agricultural use vehicles, a higher rate than obviously what is proposed by the AD plant here. So based on those findings, and obviously looking at the carriageway itself, we've assessed the TAN assessment that was produced and submitted locally by the residents, and we've taken into account looking at obviously the nature of the road and what it is. And in terms of MPPF, we cannot identify significant harm, which obviously is what we need to assess when we look at these developments.
If I could just run through the members' update. In the update, reference is made to a transport advisory note which has been produced on behalf of the local residents group. The Highways Authority have looked at this and responded accordingly as per the update. In summary, they do not consider the points raised to result in a different conclusion being made. A further transport statement has been received and the applicant has responded to this, which is again in the update. Again, the Highways Authority do not consider this to require the recommendation to be changed. There are some alterations to some of the conditions, namely condition 13 specify the construction management statement should have respect to the Farley Hill school start and finish times. Condition 24 again needs to be changed to reflect the Farley Hill school times. Condition 12 to increase the length of the bonded material to 15 metres and also to add an additional informative regarding that the condition for material should also be used an opportunity for the paint to be specified. There is some information about the storage capacity of the lagoon, but in summary, a reasonable level of storage has been proposed, and this does not raise any concern. Some queries regarding the amount of representations have been received, and this has been checked against the Council's database, and it's confirmed that the numbers stated for the first consultation period are correct. However, an administrative error meant that the number quoted for the second consultation period was incorrect, with the numbers of objections received rising to 19, stated as 10 in the report. As confirmed that all letters received...
Sorry, just to be clear, we're saying that there were 80 letters of objection in the first consultation, and how many in the second consultation?
So then that rises to 19 letters of objection in the second.
19 additional letters?
Yeah.
Thank you.
With regard to the first consultation period, it's noted that one comment is reported to have been sent in, but no confirmation of this exists on the Council's database. Finally, on page 97, paragraph 25, just a slight change to the distances given. Farley Hill School is approximately 300 metres away from the digesters and 50 metres from the access. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now I'll call on those who registered to speak. Firstly, can I have Jonathan Wheelwright? Make your way to the front. When you get to the microphone, if you press, have you got slides?
I do, yes.
Right. Okay. Are they already loaded up?
They are. They're on the desktop, whichever is the one with the desktop.
Right. If you sit there and once we get them up, I'm sure Graham will act as slide operator for you.
Lucky Graham. Thank you.
Okay, so if you press the grey button, that's when your 3 minutes starts. Thank you.
So Graham, can you do 1, 2, 3, 4? One more. Good evening. The proposed AD plant is a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year industrial facility that requires 23,000 tonnes of fuel stock each year to feed it. It's proposed to be sited on a farm in an area that has high-quality landscape in the small community of Farley Hill. This is the wrong development in the wrong location. The Swallowfield Parish Council strongly object to this proposal based on the planning harm to the community, the unsuitability of the roads in Farley Hill to support the increased volume of HGV traffic, the environmental risks being on the hill above the watercourses that feed into the Blackwater, and the proximity to the sensitive locations of the local primary school, the care home, and the housing that sits alongside the site. This is the proposed location here, and you can see that it's ringed by the school, the care home, these are the things in circles, the River Blackwater, and accessible by the oval, which is the Paul Road infrastructure from the A327. The original green intention of AD plants was to use waste biomass from the farm for energy microgeneration for the benefit of the farmer. This is not the plan for this site. This is an industrial complex being fed from farms across the county, with new contracts being drawn up to supply the fuel stock by HGV and tractor, process and inject into the national grid. The road system in Farley Hill was never designed for regular heavy traffic. Access to Hill Farm is difficult from the A327. Works from Swallowfield, where there are multiple places where the road narrows, and notably, there's the 8-ton limited Salters Bridge. Traffic from this direction passes the school and its long working hours with both pre- and after-school clubs. Traffic issues are already commonplace and will increase with the volume of heavy traffic proposed. Any issues with storage of maize on the source farms will cause huge spikes in the traffic volumes in September and October. AD plants have a checkered safety record in the UK. The Harper Adams University AD flagship in Shropshire has had spills and an explosion that breached its safety wall designed to stop fluid escaping, and it contaminated local watercourses. A similar event at the proposed Farley Hill site with its proximity to the school, the care home and the Blackwater just at the bottom of the hill would be disastrous. There isn't another farm-based AD plant in England sited close to sensitive sites as this proposal. As for the community, there will be fumes, there will be noise from the combined heat and power. You can see the strength of feeling for the local concern about this development. There will be planning harm. There will be safety concerns with the proximity to the school, the residents and the care home. This is not NIMBYism, this is genuine and considered concerns. We demonstrated the planning harm and the risks that this proposal has. We talked about the safety issues that are intrinsic in any facility that deals with flammable gas and the concern of the proposed site's proximity to those sensitive sites. In summary, we urgently request you to reject this proposal.
Thank you very much. Right, could I now invite, who's up next? Robin Bradbeer? No, sorry, Andrew Hooper. We're going to represent local residents, please. You've got a continuation, have you?
Thank you. I'm on. Good. I represent a large number of local people who are opposing this application, owing to the risk and harm from huge increases in HGV traffic levels, still undergoing some debate, I see, revealed by finding errors in the application that we did, the impact on the rural character of the area and loss of amenity, and proximity to sensitive sites has just been mentioned. We commissioned an independent specialist to look at the supporting road network, and you've received his report. He concludes that the development, I quote, conflicts with local and national policies and will endanger highway users. You can see examples of what already happens on the screen right now, cars mounting the pavement and so on. The trailers that will be used to feed and empty this facility are big, and they regularly force cars off the road and onto the pavement through current business. My children and other children at the primary school use those pavements throughout the day. The traffic concerns are compounded by the discovery of clear errors in the applicant's data, and you were provided in advance with the update that was mentioned earlier. Just one example, the weight of the trailer itself was omitted from the load calculations. I note the members' updates that we received on entering this evening. I can rebut 3 of those straight away. If you care to ask me a question afterwards, I won't use my 3 minutes now. The full effect of correcting these errors is to more than double the expected number of trips, and we suspect with further research it can easily be shown to be significantly higher. On top of all this, the AD process produces liquid outputs to be taken away in tankers, and trip levels here are, in our view, significantly underestimated. We ran out of time to get to the bottom of the real impact of that. And finally, on traffic, the applicant claims that there will be a reduction in journeys related to existing tenants at the site. We do not find this credible, as all the units currently in use appear in the plans after the AD development. So in summary on traffic levels and associated harm, we have shown that the already inadequate road network in and around Farley Hill will become subject to a stream of huge trailers going past 20 or even 30 times a day, and we can still debate, as I said, with severe risk to pedestrians, horse riders and cyclists, and major congestion when the trailers inevitably meet. There are then significant concerns in relation to a number of sensitive nearby sites. Woodbury Court nursing home houses some of the most vulnerable people in the community. It is just outside, barely outside the Environment Agency distance limit. The other sensitive site is, of course, the school. Please take a look at the existing situation on the roads at school drop-off time. You can see a farm movement already going on there and causing quite a lot of extra chaos, let alone what happens with the cars. This is a situation that's never been properly addressed throughout years of planning decisions by the Borough Council in any way. Some parents have expressed to residents that they are considering to remove their children from the school if this application goes ahead. Reasons include, of course, road safety, but also danger from the chemical processes, noise and fumes from large vehicles, and therefore bad odours from the plant itself mean windows have to be closed and ventilation reduced. Personally, I feel let down by this process, and clearly others do too, given the objections and level of opposition here tonight. A development of this scale has been allowed to proceed to this stage without widespread public consultation, denying us time to properly understand the plans nor examine in detail the claims made about the impact. Given the errors and faults we found and the ongoing debate, the residents would like to ask the committee how in all good consciousness a decision in favour could be reached on this basis. We request that this clear and suitable development to be rejected in its totality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now could I invite Robin Bradbeer and Ben Donaldson, agents for the applicant. Are you going to do this in a double act?
No, I was going to just explain, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donaldson is registered to speak. Right. He's a specialist in AD plant and processes. Right, okay. His firm.
All I'm really asking is, I don't know which of you speaks, as long as you do it between you for your 3 minutes.
I was just going to finish by saying, if therefore members have any technical questions on the processes, he's here on hand, available. Should that arise.
Thank you.
The Butler family have been running Hill Farm for 3 generations, adapting the enterprise as necessary to meet new challenges. Currently, the principal business is the production of hay and haylage for sale as animal feed. The business also runs a mix of livestock, which is processed through a butchery, which supplies meat direct to customers in local markets. The farm also provides contracting services to local farms and estates. Until the foot and mouth epidemic, the firm operated an intensive livestock enterprise, which in conjunction with rented land ran some 700 cattle and 13,000 sheep. The enterprise involved an estimated 5,000 round trips from the farm per annum. This application represents a farm diversification project which we run alongside a reduced scale hay and haylage business and a retained butchery business. The plant will convert purpose-grown crops to biogas, which will be purified and supplied to the grid via the gas line which passes the farm. Proposed and existing silage camps will be used to store crops between harvest cycles. The digestic residue will pass through a screw press to separate solids and liquids, both of which are high in nitrogen content and can be used as organic fertiliser on land. The liquid will be piped for a purpose-built lagoon, and the solid digestate will be transported to fields on the farm and on rented land for storage and use at the appropriate time in the crop cycle. The average daily feedstock requirement will be less than 80 tonnes. Feedstock will be transported to the farm by farm-owned HGVs, single HGV with trailer, and by various tractors and trailers. and this equipment is currently used for crop production and for contracting. Therefore, over the course of the day, when no silage plant material is used, the feedstock requirement can be met by 1 return HGV and 3 tractor and trailer trips. Analysis of traffic movements arising from the proposed plant and residual farm business indicate a modest increase over the existing farming enterprise from approximately 230 two-way movements per month to approximately 250. This equates to approximately 3,000 two-way movements per annum, or 8 to 10 a day. In terms of planning benefits, the proposal will generate energy from renewable resources and contribute towards reduced reliance on fossil fuels. It is therefore a sustainable farm diversification development. It will help to realise the Council's commitment to renewable technologies as set out in Development Plan Policy CC05. It is in addition, of course, with national planning policy guidance. By the recommended planning conditions, the proposal will realise further planning benefits that would otherwise arise. Those benefits include improvements at the main farm access, which have been described to you, as well as environmental and biodiversity enhancements.
Could you summarise?
In conclusion, the proposal accords with the up-to-date development plan and with national policy. Technical information has demonstrated that there are no material considerations to indicate a determination otherwise than in accordance with the development plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just before we finish, we have an expert here. Could we just understand what makes him an expert? This is not an opportunity to address the committee other than just to tell us how you're an expert in AD.
My name is Ben Donaldson. I'm representing a firm called AgriFirm. We've built 18 plants in the UK, totaling about 200 million metre cubic biomass. Okay. We're the largest in the UK.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Could you just turn the microphone off, please? And then Stuart, you can speak. Just invite Stuart Munro, who's a board member. You know the ropes, Stuart. Yeah.
Evening, Chairman and Committee. So I've got a little allergy, so if I'm a bit croaky, I do apologise. You can see the strength of feeling around here, and I think, for me, summarising this, representing my residents, I think it's a travesty, really, that there was no local consultation on this, and I think some of that might have helped this process. But however, we are where we are. I think there's been lots of confusion. I'll try and summarise what I think the issue is, and the traffic figures. I mean, all sorts of traffic volumes going past the school. It's a very bad place to drive through already. Do we really want to make that any worse? I mean, every time I drive up that road from the 327, you meet somebody coming towards you with your heart in your mouth. Am I going to get passed out to go up the pavement just to get past another car, let alone the tractor and the trailer or the truck? So I think that's ridiculous. And having vehicles coming in via Swallowfield with a very, very low weight is just ridiculous too. I don't think that adds up either, and that was supposed not to happen. I think there is no real widespread consultation on this sort of stuff, and it's probably the first one that we've seen in Wokingham, so this is a first. So understanding what the issues for one of these things are is quite strange. So that's the problem. I think the weight given to the harm that this might do, and that's the bit that I'd like to stick to, really is this going to make it any worse than we already have a very difficult situation? That's my concern, and I think that's really what the residents are worried about. They're really worried about the harm that might happen to all of the surrounding areas, the care home, the residents' houses, the school. In summary, I think this is a great idea in the wrong place. So I hope that we will be able to reach a decision which is sensible and in the public interest. I think you've heard all the issues, so it's enough from me. Thank you.
Right, before we come on to hear the committee's opinion on this and the questions they need to ask, just a few points I think would be useful to clarify. This is an existing farm, and as an existing farm, it could return to any number of traditional agricultural uses tomorrow without requiring any planning permission. Such as a livestock farm or a dairy farm, and that's because. Sorry.
Fine with that.
Yep. Just say that's the position. And for that reason, it's very difficult for us to start saying we restrict the traffic numbers, because tomorrow there could be any number of vehicles going in and out of that site 24/7 without any restriction. And you may not like it, but it's nothing that the committee here could do about that. Just want you to understand that background element to it. Yeah. Okay. So let's see what members have to say. Who wishes to speak on this?
Admit my question.
All right. Okay. We'll start with you, Michelle.
Okay, maybe I can ask this of the active digester person. What is the danger of this particular development? What can happen, and what's the likelihood of that occurring? Some of these pictures of explosions and things like this.
Yep. Well, firstly, the registered speakers have all spoken. It's not normal practice to allow further speaking, but I will ask, would the audience like to hear the opinion of the specialist? Or are you not? Fine, that's fine. Just giving you that opportunity. We
know all we need to know about AD.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks.
Then can I ask the officers?
So we'll ask the officers now.
My understanding is that there are measures in place to ensure that that kind of thing can happen. There's quite a few steps that are taken to ensure that it can happen. I think there's about 5 different levels of safety measures, and eventually the point is that you would ultimately turn the AD plant off, as it were, to stop anything like that from happening.
What happens to their flagships?
Sorry. So it's regulated partly by health and safety, and presumably the Environment Agency also have been consulted, and obviously they've responded in the report. So presumably the Environment Agency also has some involvement in, particularly with a review to possible pollution incidents.
Yeah, that's right.
Further question is, what would happen if they went back to livestock? Could they have a big slurry pool that would be considerably more stinky with cow excrement as opposed to this less smelly stuff?
Yeah. So do you mean as in, could they do that and then put that into the AD plant?
No. Just could they just do that if they felt like, if they changed their mind and decided to come? You said that they could have a. Sorry. You said they could have change their use to cattle, intensive cattle farming, and if they did, what would they do with all the excrement and things like this? If they had a slurry pool, would that be considerably more odoriferous than?
I mean, yes, it would be, but the AD plant itself wouldn't create that kind of smell because it's not using those kind of materials to be input. It's just feedstock.
Mr. Vaughan, are you an expert on this? Do you know what?
Sorry. This is not an opportunity.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise that. I thought it was.
No, it's not. I did try and make that very clear at the start.
I apologise.
Yeah, we do have an expert who is provided by the applicant. I accept people's concern. I would just point out that it would be highly unlikely that the council would happen to have an in-house expert on
Okay, so can I just ask one question?
No. Right, now we carry on with the
Thank you very
meeting. Well, it's not practical to have 80 people all asking questions as we go along. Okay. Right, Chris.
Well, I sympathise with the objectors very much. It's very unfortunate we can't really discuss the HGV movements, but there's no point, isn't it, refusing a planning application for an invalid reason, because all that will happen is the applicant will go to appeal and we'll lose, and we could get costs, and we'll have no control over the conditions on the application. So that's a dead-end road. Having dealt with that, the question I'd like to ask is why actually is this before? Why do you need planning permission for this? What are the? Why precisely do we need planning permission for this?
Chairman, the reason this requires planning permission is because it's a major scheme, given and that this type of activity is not permitted development. A lot of agricultural activity is permitted development, but this particular is not permitted development. Is there any technical reason why you can think why planning permission is required?
It's primarily the size and scale of the proposal.
It's just that the chairman was indicating maybe go back to sheep farming. I think you're implying there wouldn't be planning permission for that.
Absolutely.
But this is different.
If you recall, we've had situations, Chris, where we had a office building that had not been used for many, many years, which was suitable for 400 people. And when, I think it was Johnson & Johnson took it over as their new headquarters, residents were concerned there was going to be a lot of traffic coming in and out of it, and there was nothing we could do about it because previously there had been a lot of traffic coming out of it. It had established use, and as a farm that's been in use for 3 generations, there is that established use. One of the reasons I think I agree with your point is that clearly this is a step beyond conventional agriculture, and we've had similar situations. We recall last year we had a 35-hectare solar farm in 3 Mile Cross, which was again, that isn't traditional agriculture, so it has to come before the planning committee. So that's the principal reason that it's here. John, you wish to speak?
I've listened to the argument about transport, and I think it's pretty well known that we don't really have much in the way of control with this farm if they decided to go back having 13,000 sheep and 700 cows.
48.
What I would be interested in is what sort of level of movement we see from the farm today and what this increase will bring those movements up to. We heard earlier 5,000 round trips per annum were occurring when they had the sheep and the cows. I'm just wondering what sort of number we would be looking at added to the current movement.
Well, I'm sure if we ask the applicant and we ask the objectors, we get a series of different numbers. So I'm going to do neither. I'm going to ask the highways officer, who's not biased either way. Chris.
Based on the figures provided in the TS, we have the existing business round trips. So obviously I've doubled these up just as you've got inbound and outbound, but obviously for the sake of argument, we've just rounded everything times it by 2 to give you a worst case assessment. So the existing business round trips are identified to generate 5,422 annual movements, as well as the residual. So there's the existing, which obviously is the residual and the existing, but obviously moving forward you can have the AD and the residual, whereas some of the existing fall away. So if I just give you the total is residual. So in total, what we've got from the hay, straw inbound, chiller vans, tenants, fertiliser deliveries, chiller vans, all the other parts that are still being maintained and operating is 8,000 vehicle movements, just over 2 round trips a year from the existing. So that's the existing, which obviously then if you take into account the AD plant and the residual which is being retained, that's 6,044. And this is based on obviously an assessment of winding that up and obviously doubling it by 2. The AD group, the Farley Hill AD group, obviously they've provided, and we do appreciate obviously the figures that were put in. We had a conversation, we discussed this with the Parish Council, and they demonstrated, for example, 18-tonne trailer laden may not actually take 18 tonnes worth of material. The trailer itself may have a 4 or 5 tonne limit for the trailer itself, therefore you can only take a theoretical 13 or 14 tonnes of a load, for example. So by applying those additional figures, which is what the AD group have done, they've given us obviously a higher figure, and theirs, if I can just find, there's obviously an increased figure, so that would generate they've identified that obviously by increasing the movements it would generate 7,827. So there was a difference of about 1,000, just under about 800 to 1,000 movements. Which, whilst on the whole sounds like obviously a lot, like we do with every development, you have peaks and troughs, you have peak hours, you have the hours of operation. So if you kind of took that, as I mentioned before, if you take that across the months, obviously you've got a spreadsheet which calculates the peaks that they had. So obviously based on the higher figures, you have a daily fluctuation, which obviously ranges anywhere from between additional 8 obviously in June, or obviously 2 during the January, for example, was the worst case. It's obviously doubling up to 16 per day, additional per day. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, 2 for the lowest.
Can we also just touch on the school? Can we just touch on the school? I mean, I did hear somebody say there is a restriction during school hours. How enforceable is that?
But the children walk to school, to the playground, which is all the way down that road, any time of the day. Not just pick up and drop off time.
Sorry, just to be real clear, as I said earlier, the farm has existing use. We cannot control the existing use. Vehicles are currently going up and down that road today. Okay, we have no control over that at all. I'd be kidding you if I told you that we had control over the vehicles that were travelling there currently. We don't. Okay, the 18-tonne limit on Salters Bridge is not a limit, it's an advisory, and it was there, if I'm correct, because of concerns about traffic, large traffic movement. It's not a safety limit related to the structure of the bridge. My understanding is to restrict the number of large vehicles using the road. And I'm sure we would all like to restrict the large number of vehicles using the road. As I've said, the farm has existing established use, and we cannot restrict the type or size of vehicles that are going on that road. Not least because the only vehicles that will be going on that road will not exclusively be vehicles from this farm, other farms in the area.
I think the first thing to mention is that it's not in the applicant's interest to leave the site or indeed enter the site at school time. Certainly it would not be beneficial for them to be sitting in traffic either. Secondly, that I'm sure that residents would be able to monitor themselves, and we do rely on residents to inform us regarding enforcement action. So I'd say that would be partially how we would look at it as well.
John, does that address your point?
Can I just get this clear then? We have no opportunity to enforce any form of restriction on any of the roads, whether outside school or otherwise, for traffic going past at any time.
Not at present. Not at present. Okay. All right. Tim, thank you.
Can you tell me what improvements have been made to the system since the Harbour Adam accident?
Chairman, I don't think we as planning officers are qualified to make that technical argument, and I think that again, it's something for.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
It's something as planning officers, I'm not technically qualified to be able to explain the very detail of what additional safety requirements have been incorporated into the design of the plant as a result of the previous incident. All I can advise members is that the regulation is outside of the planning system, and there are other adequate regulatory mechanisms, and as a result it is a matter for health and safety and for the Environment Agency, as already been indicated.
Can we just get some clarity also, please, on the nature of the material? Because clearly my understanding is that AD plants can take material from abattoirs, from restaurants, household waste, but I believe in this case the feedstock is purpose-grown material. Can you confirm whether there's a planning condition that would mean that they could not change the feedstock material without formal permission? Because that's clearly the nature of the material you're dealing with is clearly has. I mean, we noticed on site, for instance, there was material stored under on the silage glands which you were standing beside, and there was no odour at all from them. Whereas I'm sure if it had been animal waste or abattoir waste, we wouldn't have wanted to get even closer. Can you just clarify that, please?
That's correct. Condition 9 restricts what would be able to be put into the AD plant. And I'll just quote from it, in particular, no waste product shall be processed in the plant. So if that was to happen, then we could take enforcement action against it.
How would you know if it happened?
It's the same position as we face across the borough. It's not possible to have a council enforcement officer standing beside the 4,000 planning application sites that go on. We rely very much on the eyes and ears of local people, and in particular parish and town councils that tend to channel that information to us. That is how the council starts most enforcement actions. It's either neighbours or local knowledge that expresses concerns about things that are going on. And that gives us the opportunity to ascertain whether what they're doing is in accordance with the regulations and the plans, or whether they're not. And if they're not, as was indicated, we can take enforcement action. Do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The other thing that's worth, the type of, one of the primary reasons for this condition is one of preventing odour, and in the event that there was odour, then at that stage I'm sure that we will be alerted to that, and between planning enforcement and environmental health there would be that investigation into that issue, and if it was found that they weren't complying with that condition, then appropriate enforcement action would be taken at that time.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. As I understand it, this type of plant is totally sealed to minimise any odour that actually comes from the plant. Am I correct in that? And the other thing is, if we refused this, the likelihood, if it went to an appeal of an inspector granting it, is, bearing in mind government policy, is probably quite high, in my opinion, and that would probably not have such stringent conditions on that we're putting on. Would you like to comment on that? I have to say that I actually will be abstaining from the vote because it is so contentious, and I didn't actually visit the site. I don't feel qualified to make that decision due to other commitments.
Shall I just comment on the planning inspector position? Right, just again for clarity for everybody, obviously this planning committee has a recommendation in front of it to approve it. If we decide not to approve it, it's obviously refused. If it's refused, as I mentioned earlier on, the applicant has a right to go to appeal. That appeal is quite independent of the council and is done by a planning inspector who comes to visit the site, looks at all the case files, all the letters of objection, all the information that was used in the council forming the decision, and then they go away and make a decision, and that will either be to support the council's position or to go against the council's position. Generally planning, I think most planning inspector decisions, I think it's about 75% of them are of the council's decisions that are challenged at appeal are actually supported by the planning inspector, and a minority are overturned. The risk when they're overturned is you don't have conditions that are there to try and protect local people. There's a whole series of conditions in this application that have been worded in such a way to try and address some of the concerns that have been expressed in the letters and the meetings that have taken place on this. A planning inspector has no obligation to agree to that, and will often have a different, more limited, what I would loosely call an off-the-shelf set of conditions, one size fits all, that will generally mean, in our view, and a number of us have been doing this for a number of years, you end up with a planning permission that the council has limited control over, and you end up with the residents getting what they didn't want in the first place, and with the council having limited opportunities to regulate that. So just be aware that's the background. Wayne, I think you should say.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I think we're very clear on the traffic situation. There's not very much we can do there, but can we come back to harm? Just 2 points. Has the Environment Agency actually visited this site? Because it says on page 80, no objection, subject to condition 3 and informative 2. Or has this all been done central office via a plan?
I don't know the answer to that. However, I can't clarify the answer to that. However, they will be responding to the technical information that they have received, and usually I mean, what is supporting the planning application is prepared by a professional with professional integrity, credibility, and all the rest of it. And they have to retain their professional status, actually give the information in support based on the best of their knowledge and expertise. So what the Environment Agency would do, they would be assess that and to look at whether or not they feel that the certain requirements and conditions are met. I would suggest for the type of issues the Environment Agency are looking at in respect of this application, a site visit is probably not necessary in order to assess their particular issues.
That's something we have no influence over.
No,
It's the
absolutely.
Environment Agency is a national body, and we just have to accept their view on it. And that will be a view that will be taken into consideration by a planning inspector as well. Did you have a second question?
Yeah. Sorry, and I fully appreciate the reasons why you wouldn't want the expert to speak, but I think the gentleman from the PC said there is an example of one of these installed in such a locality. I'd be interested, if you would allow him to speak, to just, if he could expand on that, to give us any examples of, has anything like this been installed in a village location?
Well, the residents, if it was a council-employed specialist, which we don't have council specialists in AED or photovoltaic or wind farms, that would be the case. But since the majority of people present have made it very clear they don't believe that. Mary, do you have any view on that from a legal perspective?
Well, sorry.
On the fact that the applicant has a specialist available, but that it would not be considered to be unbiased?
It is correct that, of course, this gentleman is representing the applicant, and it does not work for the council. So it's not someone that we really ought to rely on in his professional capacity. That's not to say that you understand, I don't mean to put your professional capacity down in any way. It's just that you don't represent the council, and as you said, Chairman.
All right. Okay, Michelle?
Perhaps even though we can't ask the expert questions, maybe we could ask him what caused the problem that exploded the other one. I don't think you'll have an objection having...
Michelle, sorry, we're straying well beyond the realms of planning. Our planning is to apply planning, not what-ifs on health and safety and matters that are completely out of our control as a leader. It's not part of our remit.
Would you want this behind your child's school?
Okay. Right. Any other members wishing to speak on this?
I would like to just...
Yep.
I have feelings for everybody in this room.
Yep.
I actually live in that area, so I understand the problem with traffic. The problem I've got with this is I read the consultation response and there's no objections. I think that if it goes to appeal, you may lose some of the good conditions that we've got. But I am a democratically elected person, and there's a lot of people in this room, and I would honestly say that if they want to spin the dice and go before an inspector, I think I would probably support that. I'm not saying for one moment, that's the right decision. It's just a decision that I'm making at the moment.
They might read our objections.
The inspector can add conditions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first thing obviously is if you're going to propose an alternative to the recommendation in front of us, we have to have, as you say, reasons for that. We can't simply object it because, I can remember sitting in this room not a few years ago when the farm opposite me wanted to change its operations very significantly, and 200 residents turned up and objected because the road had a 6-foot restriction and it was used by horses and children. And the eventual decision on that was there were no actual grounds to refuse it. So you've just said to me, John, that the consultation response is from the professionals. These are the independent professionals within the council, or in the case of Natural England, the Forestry Commission or the Environment Agency, independent national bodies. They have raised no objection. And you know as well as I do that we would be holding out a false hope to these residents if we said we'll reject it but we haven't really got a sound reason to do it, but we'll reject it. You know exactly what the planning board will do in that case. He would not only approve it because there are no reasons to disprove it, it would also award costs against the council, which we collectively end up paying, including all the council taxpayers like the rest of us sitting here. So I'd be very interested to know what your grounds for putting an alternative proposal. I'm very happy if you've got an alternative grounds, and we'll put that to the vote if it's seconded.
Simon, I know enough about this to know that there aren't grounds that would probably stand up to inspection. But I'm having a real problem with this. I'm a believer in localism, unlike most of the inspectors I've come across. And I can't offer, I would probably just abstain.
So you're not elected to abstain, John. You can't sit on the fence on the place.
Well, I think I want to on this one.
Okay, so I will ask once again. We'll take this in order. Are there any members of the planning committee who wish to put an alternative proposal forward for us to consider? And obviously we need to know what the reasons are for that. There have to be planning reasons. It's because of a specific planning reason, not simply because we don't like it. That isn't a valid planning reason. So, Rochelle.
I just wonder if we can ask to defer this to get an active digester expert with the council.
On what basis, though? I mean, what?
Defer it for a month, just to let the council find somebody who can check to see what the safety and the impact of this anaerobic digester is.
First of all, Chairman, I think I'd just like clarification. If you mentioned, Rochelle, impact, I'm not quite clear what you mean by impact.
The safety and other things that are involved.
Safety?
Yes.
Okay, Chairman, I think I've already...
Sorry, let's just get real clarity. Are you talking about highway safety, which we have our expert on and we've heard of, or are you talking about plant safety?
Plant safety, since we can't ask the expert here, could we have an expert that we can ask?
Chairman, I think I've already explained to the committee that I am of the view that the safety of the equipment is monitored and overseen and regulated by other agencies, not the local planning authority. Whether or not we like that or not, that is the position. And as a result, it is a matter which is outside of the remit of the planning system and its planning committee.
That regulation was in place when Harper Adams had two separate leaks breaching their bund that's supposed to stop the leak, and it went into the local river.
And I'm sure the Environment Agency, who are the body responsible for protection of the Blackwater, are aware of that and would have taken that into consideration. I'm afraid we can't dictate how the Environment Agency respond to the professional consultation we are obliged to do and have done, and it is reported here. I'm sorry, I don't have any control or influence over the Environment Agency. They're a national body, and we have to take their information presented to us on face value. No, we're not having an ongoing discussion. I'm sorry, it's not the way it works.
Could I just say that this type of plant releases bioaerosols, which are carried in the wind, the elderly and young.
Sorry, just to reiterate what Claire said, is that the safety of this site is up to other regulations. It's not a planning matter.
Okay, that's the legal position.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the objections that haven't been read yet because they were only found today, even though they were put in time?
Okay, Claire?
My understanding about the objections which we have received, that all of them were fully considered. There was a typo in the report that stated there were a number of objections. All of the objections which we have received have been outlined in detail in the report, and members, I will refer you
on the website.
I will refer you to the pages of that. That's through 83 through to 91, and there is extensive coverage of all of the points raised. And here's somebody asking me whether or not they're on the website. There is a process, an administrative process, where applications, comments are received, and they go on, they don't go on the website automatically. Sometimes they don't go on to the end of the process or somewhere through the middle of the process. We have a normal protocol in place, but just because it's on the website or not on the website doesn't mean it has or it hasn't been taken into consideration. We have been through today at the request of residents that have made this point. We have been through all of those objections again, and we have cross-referenced them with the information that we have put in the report, and we have clarified, and we feel satisfied that all of those objections have been taken on board.
Quiet, please. I will point out that on pages 83 to 92 of the report, which I hope most of you have access to, there is a list, a very, very detailed list, of all the objections that have been raised. In one column, and in the right-hand column, there is the council as the official planning authority's response to that.
Is the council confident that actually you should review them? Because you're going to be very expensive to do that.
We're absolutely confident, because the whole point of a judicial review is to give you the democratic opportunity to challenge our decision.
No, your procedure,
okay.
Not the decision, the procedure, judicial review.
Okay,
You're
fine.
challenging your procedure.
You can change. You're free to change the procedure, challenge the procedure,
It
because.
costs a lot more than an inspector.
Sorry.
It costs you a lot more than it costs if you lose the field.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't do threats.
Can I just advise the members of the audience, I'm not abstaining from this vote, because you are not helping your case by this continual interruption. We need to be able to think straight.
Bob, it's a highly charged situation.
I know, but it's not helpful.
I remember when people wanted to make major changes to the farm in my village, there was 200 people sat in here and the other.
No, I understand the concern, but it's very difficult to hear what people are saying.
Understood. And just to reiterate, if somebody wishes to have a judicial review, that is fine, but I will give you one piece of advice that I won't charge you for, but the lawyers will charge you for. And that is, I've seen many occasions where local authorities have had a decision challenged because the process has been deemed not to be correct. And then what happens is the courts order the council to go and do it again, exactly to the procedure, and you get the same decision. So you pay tens of thousands of pounds, and you end up in the same position. It's a bit of free advice. Up to you whether you take it. Yeah. Okay, right, members. John, are you going to put forward a proposal, or are you going to abstain?
I'm reading all the objections. I cannot find an objection that would stand up at a planning inspection. So I can't offer a planning result.
And no other members are indicating they wish to speak or coming forward with an alternative, so we have no option now but to come to a decision on the recommendation that is in front of us. So members, you've had the report, you've visited the site, you've no doubt read in some detail the very significant list of objections raised from nearly 100 people. You've heard the views of the Parish Council. We've also seen the views of the professional council staff from Highways, Environment, and we've also seen the views of those that the council is obliged to consult nationally, such as the Environment Agency and Natural World. Those are all contained in the report. We had an opportunity to hear from specialists in this area, but the committee felt, or rather the residents, and I tend to support them on this, that the committee felt and the residents felt that a specialist provided by the applicant would not really be seen as unbiased. We also considered whether we should have an independent person brought in to look at the safety aspect of this. We heard very clearly from the Head of Development Control that the safety aspect is something that is outside of the remit of planning, and we will be going beyond our remit if we did that and subject to challenge for that. So members have a clear recommendation in front of you. Can you please indicate whether you're willing to support the officer's recommendation? And there are 4 members voting to support it. Are the rest of you abstaining? Who's abstaining? 1, 2, and Rochelle? You're abstaining. So 3 people abstaining, 4 people recommending it. That application is approved.
That's outrageous. Why not vote against?
On what basis?
We don't have a planning reason, unfortunately.
We know who the guys are that voted for it.